Good Erev Shabbos, everyone. Erev Shabbos, Parshas Vaera. And I want to ask a question for the Shabbos table, as we always do. But this time, not only for the Shabbos table, but if keep this in mind, you can also use it at the Siddur. That's one of the advantages of the Parshas that we're discussing now. It doesn't just pay off in the short term for the Parshas HaShavua, it also pays off in the long term that we're able to use it again at the Siddur. So I want to ask a question that for sure is one of the focal points of the Seder. And that is, in the beginning of the Parsha, we have the Dalad L'shonos Shel Geulah, the four languages of redemption. If you look in the, I think it's Perek Vav, Pasuk Vav, and Pasuk Zayin, where the Pesukim say, Hashem v'hoitzeisi, I'm going to remove you from Mitzrayim. V'hitzalti, I'm going to save you, ma'avodasim, I think. V'go'alti, I am going to redeem you. V'lokachti, li'la'am, I'm going to take you as a nation. We have four languages of geulah that at the Seder correspond to the 4 cups of wine, right? 4 languages of geulah, 4 cups of wine. So the question I want to pose is, why wine? Why did Chazal choose wine to represent the 4 languages of geulah? Why wine? It could have been challah, it could have been knishes, it could have been potato kugel, it could have been challah, not a Pesach challah at least. But why did Chazal choose wine? That's question number 1. Question number 2 is, what do the Lashonos of Geulah represent? What does that mean? I took you out, and I saved you, and I redeemed you, and I took you to myself. What's the deeper meaning in these 4 Lashonos of Geulah? And with that, we start our Meshech Chachma for this week. Says the Meshech Chachma, the 4 languages of Geulah represent 4 steps in the redemption process. And V'hoitzeisi is the first one. V'hoitzeisi is, I will remove you. I will take you out of where you are. It's not focusing on bringing to me, it's just, I'll take you out of your current situation. Like Chazal says the Meshech Chachma, L'hoitzi goy mikerav goy, that the Jewish people were like a fetus inside a mother. We were concealed. It was like one nation, it looked like. And Hashem came and took out a goy mikerav goy. He took us out of our environment, that we were totally subsumed in this environment. That's Hoitzah, and that represents the fact that Jewish people were Mishukayim ba'avodah zarah v'deos mishchasas. The Yidden, unfortunately, in that period of time, they were steeped in idolatry, in other immoral activity, in deos koizin, they had bad philosophies, negative philosophies, and Hashem had to remove us from our spiritual state, from our mental state. Not referring to a physical redemption, but hoitzeisi means I'm going to take you out of the rut that you're in. I'm going to take you out of that idolatrous mindset, the deus mishchasas mindset. I'm taking you out. That's hoitzeisi. The hitzalti is a physical saving. The nation wanted to kill you, says the Meshech Chachma. Kol haben hayuloid hayuloid tashlichu. We're going to throw all the children into the river. And this is kamatzim in aratzeach. The hitzalti, the second language of Geulah, represents Hashem saving us from the person running after us with the knife. Right, so the hoitzeisi is the immoral, saving us from our immoral environment. The hitzalti is saving us from a physical threat. The go'alti, says the Meshech Chachma, is changing the eved from being a slave to being free, not being meshubed, not being subservient to anyone but Hashem. That's the go'alti. And the lokachti is to now turn you into an amni musii ulu'umi, to turn you into a nation, to give you an identity as a nation. Those are the 4 steps. The first step is taking us out of our immoral environment. Second step was removing the physical threat. Third step is changing that slave mentality into free men. And the 4th step is turning us into an actual positive nation that is the nation of Hashem. This corresponds to 4 cups of wine. The Meshech Chachma explains that each cup of wine, how it corresponds to each step of the geulah. So let's go through this relatively quickly. It says the Meshech Chachma that the first cup of wine is Kiddush. Right? Kiddush represents V'hoitzeisi, because Kiddush is Kedusha. What's Kedusha? As the Gemara says, wherever you find Gili Arayus, or a separation from illicit relationships, that's where you find Kedusha. Kedusha is when the Jew separates himself from immoral relationships, from looking at things that one should not be looking at. That is Kedusha. So Kiddush represents the first cup of wine, which is V'hoitzeisi, separating ourselves from the immoral environment that we found ourselves in, and Be'ezhem, we continue to separate ourselves from that. So that's morality. The Hitzalti, which represents saving the victim from his potential murderer, that was because the following. Says the Meshech Chochmah, had the Jewish people been running at each other to kill each other, Hashem wouldn't have been able to save them. Hashem says, I can save a victim from a potential murderer. But if they're running after each other and trying to kill each other, who am I going to save from who? Says the Meshech Chochmah, the Medrash says that one of the schuyos, the merits the Yidden had in Mitzrayim, is that they weren't megala the secrets of each other to other people. They didn't speak lashon hara about each other. They didn't tattletale on each other to other people. They, like we said last week, they didn't air their dirty laundry. They kept things to themselves. That is v'hitzalti. If you act b'shalom, with peace, and you get along with each other, then I see you as the victim and I'll save you. But once you're fighting with each other, so then the Mitzrayim are fighting with you, you're fighting with each other, what's the difference? The second schus the Klal Yisrael had, the physical salvation, was due to the shalom that they had with each other. Number 3, and I'm sorry, that refers to benching, which is the third cup actually. That's the bench. The Birchas Hamazon. Birchas Hamazon represents the fact that I know what I have is what Hashem wants me to have, and I thank Hashem for what I have. And what this person has is what Hashem wants him to have. I don't need that. Benching shows bitachon and emunah, and malshinas, lashon hara, comes from a lack of bitachon and emunah. It comes from when I see, why does this guy have that? I'm jealous of that. Why is he strong? Why is he so smart? And then lashon hara comes. So in order to combat that, we have benching, which reminds us that whatever Hashem sends my way, that's what I'm supposed to have. That's the second cup. The third cup of Ga'alti represents the salvation, becoming a free man, which is also psychological, because a slave is a nobody. A slave is not connected to his past, says the Meshech Chochmah. A slave is a piece of furniture. You have a dog, you have a table, you have a slave. That's what a slave is. He's shuffled. As the Gemara says, Yevamis, David Leslechiyas, he has no connection to his father, grandfather, he has no familial identity. And the Yidden rezoicha to this geulah, to become free men, leishinu shmoisei. They didn't change their names. They kept their names, as the Medrash says, Reuven and Shimon went down to Mitzrayim, and people called Reuven and Shimon came out of Mitzrayim. So they kept their identity, they kept their connection to their past, they kept their tradition, and that is represented by the second cup of wine that we have, that we say the Leil Seder, by the first half of Hallel. Says the Meshech Chochmah, the first half of Hallel is miyusad al zichron yachas ha'umma me'avoseya zichron neseya ha'kedumas. The second cup of wine, the first half of Hallel represents our connection to our past. That's the Messiah. So again, their morality is what saved them, their shalom between each other is what saved them, and their connection to their past. A slave has no connection to his past. A free man has a family tradition. He has a Messiah. That is V'Ga'alti. And the Lokachti is that they did not change their language. They kept their language. A nation's identity is through the language. Pakay Pakadati, that Lashon that signaled the Geulah was in Lashon HaKodesh. And that was the schus of Klal Yisrael, is to have that national identity, which is the fourth cup of wine on the Seder night, which is, we said on the second half of Hallel, Shemiyusat al Halugumius Ha'asida. That is connected to the future national redemption, that we have our identity. We speak Lashon HaKodesh, and that is our identity. Those are the four languages of Geulah. Those are the four zechuyos Klal Yisrael had. They needed in order to be redeemed. Was the morality, the shalom bein ish l're'ehu, they're clinging on to the old ways, to the tradition, to their forefathers, and their identity, their national identity, which was represented by their language. Why did the Chazal choose wine to represent that? Why dafka wine? So the Meshech Chochmah says that wine is one of nothing represents the distinction between the Jew and the Nachri, Yosim Hayayin. As Haman said to Achashverosh, if you touch the wine, they won't drink it, but if a fly falls in the wine, they'll take out the fly and they'll drink it. So wine is that which cuts us off. Chazal are masakin it in their infinite wisdom to distance us from the Nachrim, and that's why the Dal Koises are wine. So we see the four things. Why were the Jews zoiche to leave Mitzrayim? There were four things that they needed, and if we incorporate these four things into ourselves today, we should be zoiche to leave our current goals, and that is morality. We have to make sure we're only looking at things we should be looking at. we're only having relationships with people we should be having relationships with. Kedusha comes from distancing oneself from their titles. As with the Rambam, the Sefer Kedusha has Isurei Bia, and he has Machalas Asuris and Shchita. Food and Arayas are those two areas where the Jew becomes a Kaddish. So the first thing is Kedusha. We have to bring Kedusha into our lives. We have to live a life of Kedusha. That's only moral activity. Separating ourselves from immorality is the first step to get us out of our current gullus. And that's what got the Jews out of the gullus of Mitzrayim. Then having peace between each other, not being malsh, not speaking lashon hara. Everyone has very strong opinions about how the Jew and the shul should act within our pandemic, within COVID. And if I don't like the way you're acting, so I will post it somewhere. I will speak about how it's chil Hashem what you are doing. That is a violation of this hitzalti. If we want Hashem to protect us physically, which we definitely need, we always need, that we have to make sure we're not airing our dirty laundry. Nothing is to be gained by me critiquing someone else. It's one thing if I have students, I'm trying to mechanech them what to do, or my children, but stam to talk to my friends about how this sect is not doing the right thing and that sect is not doing the right thing. One who does that is even worse because he is pushing off the geulah. Because the second merit the Jewish people had to leave Mitzrayim was they were at peace with each other. They didn't air their dirty laundry. There was no malshinas, no lashon hara. They had bitachon in Hashem. That's the second step. The third step, the geulah is the Messiah. We have to make sure that we're not trying to introduce new things into our service of Hashem. We always ask ourselves, when a new thing comes up, how come they didn't do this beforehand? Why is it only now we have the question about it? The answer might be times have changed, and therefore they would also agree that we should do this difference now. But we always have to think about the Messiah. We always have to stay very connected to the world that was, to our forefathers. As my Rosh Yeshiva Tzvi Kaplan always says, Matan Torah didn't happen on your table last night. There's a Klal Yisrael. Connected to the Messiah is the only way we will get out of this gullus. And finally, the lokachti, we have to make sure we have our identity, our national identity, that there is a big difference between the Yid and the Nachri. We have to make sure that we act in a Yiddish way. And if we can incorporate all these four things into our lives, into our families' lives, we'll be zocheh to the geulah. So these are the four reasons why Hashem so fitting the Jews should leave Mitzrayim. And this is why Chazal were misakein on wine, the Dalid Koisis of Pesach, which corresponds to the Dalid, the Shonis of Geulah. We should all be zocheh to have the Geulah Shlema, wishing everyone a wonderful Shabbos.